Okay, then I wanted to take a look at a response. There's a lot of responses on this forum thread, on the WCA forum, but I wanted to take a look at one that came in pretty quickly after the board made their response. And it's this one here, made by somebody called Zachary Miller, who is a trainee delegate who used to be on the WCA advisory committee as well. And what he's saying right at the start here, since this information is identical to what was sent to staff, that's referring to the board's statement, albeit with some omissions, I would like to post my... Oh, is that shots fired? Albeit with some omissions. I would like to post my reply that I sent to staff when this was communicated internally. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Blake, and the board for taking time to respond to all of our concerns publicly and provide your angle on the issue. It definitely helps that context has been added, but I and probably others are still confused and disagree with the decision made here. I'll go ahead and sum up my thinking into different points. It does definitely help that context has been added. At least we can understand, because here's the thing, here's the position the board got into with this, is they were able to let the rumor mill run wild. I've kind of alluded to this before. They unfortunately, in their approach, whether or not they saw this coming, whether or not they thought that it would be as controversial as it was, I mean, they must have, given the conversations they've had with the WRC, but then to not have anything prepared to say afterwards is a little bit, what? How you know what I mean? Like that's confusing to me. But it's what it is. I'm not on the board. I can only observe it from the outside and, just say my stupid things and then carry on from there. But here we go. Our man here, Zachary, is going to sum up his thinking into different points. Okay. The main crux for the board's argument appears to be a competitor's very fast 2x2 result, which was scrutinized for having a sliding start. I'm not sure what the brackets are about, which is already among many pro-cubing circles considered to be a controversial result, subjective, but sure, and the WRC handling this case differently. Although I can understand some of this reasoning, I can see a few flaws on my end. One, as someone else mentioned internally, as above, this incident seems to be much more harder to notice an illegal start after I watched the video. Okay, he's talking about the other incident, the 0.53. This incident seems to be much more harder to notice than an illegal start after I watched the video. While the 0.78 average, it's significantly easier to tell. I mean, for example, we're letting a 19 TPS 2x2 solve stand with this decision. Well, I take issue with that, actually. Honestly, I think the 0.53 is just so easy to spot in real time. That's my opinion. I think they're about the same. They're both spottable. I think this is maybe slightly hysterical, I'm not sure. 2, the WRC compared to 2 years ago has an astronomically different makeup in terms of members, and diversity of thought and perspectives and community thought on these issues can change over this time period. I don't disagree with you there, Zachary, but as I pointed out in my previous video, there was a paper trail of this being an issue and not being resolved. That is not 100% on the board, I don't think. I think that's on the WRC. Doesn't matter who's on it and when. The WRC is still a thing, is still a committee, is still an entity. So I don't buy that 100%. No shade on Zachary, by the way. Zachary is passionate and obviously represents a different part of the community than what I do. So carrying on, with these in mind, I want to raise some issues and arguments. Relying on a past decision from 2 years ago that may have been flawed should not prevent us from making the right choice now. Agreed. If previous incidents weren't penalised due to a limitation in policy or enforcement method, it does not mean we should be continuing this pattern, especially when better analysis methods or new evidence become available. I did talk about that in my previous video. We can't just sweep something under the rug because something wasn't penalised 2 years ago. I hear what you're saying. I do hear what you're saying there, Zachary. I hear what you're saying. But I also hear what the board are saying, which is like, hey, this was meant to be tidied up. Why is it not tidied up? I think that would have been a valid question for the board, actually, to just be like, what in the hell are you doing? Why have you put us in this position? Why was this not tidied up? Tidy it up right now and apply it retroactively. Like, is that too harsh? Is that too harsh? From me, I wonder. Like, I feel like, and it's not the board's fault, and it's not the board members' fault, but, and hindsight's 2020, isn't it? But we can see now what a catastrophic mess this has made. The WRC, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I think about it, the WRC dropped the ball by not tidying that up in 2022 or 23. Sorry, but that's kind of what I'm feeling, because that is exactly what has led us to this position, and it's what led the board to this awful situation where they're now, being just vilified and attacked. They haven't communicated correctly. They haven't communicated effectively. Of course. That is a problem in of itself. But this problem, this situation, the more I'm seeing stuff like this, the more I'm seeing is actually the WRC has to take some responsibility for that. And there are certain people who are not going to like me saying that. I don't think, because people have history with the board and things like that. So, the board mentions consistency and how it creates fairness in your reply. True fairness comes from consistency, applying the rules to uphold the integrity of our sport, not just to consistently apply them in general. Allowing a result to stand because of a past oversight sets an extremely concerning precedent that if someone makes a flawed decision in the past, it can be exploited as there's no policy in place. I hear you, Zachary, but unfortunately that is how organizations like the WCA are sort of meant to operate. It's not perfect. And it's susceptible to issues like this and mistakes like this. I'm going to assume the board must have a policy review cycle. They must have. But that said, the fact that this policy hasn't come round in not 2 years, but over a year. But then the board wouldn't be looking at regulation policies. The board would be looking at high-level board policy. If it's a proper board that is concerned with governance and governance only. But they're not, are they? They're not. They're doing a lot of operational stuff. For those of you who don't know, this is boards. Boards are supposed to do governance. Governance. Big, high-level stuff. And it's supposed to delegate operational duties to, under normal circumstances, it'd be someone like a CEO. In a school, it's a head teacher, and then they handle all the operations, and the board doesn't touch operations. The WCA board has its hands all over operations, from what I have observed, from looking at their motions and their minutes and things like that. There's a lot of operational stuff that goes through the board, and that's a red flag for me. And that's, again, not an accusation, just an observation. Puts on, okay, here we go. Zachary's putting on his former WCA Advisory Council leader cap for a second, okay? Listen up. You may have seen there is near unanimous, unanimous opposition to this decision among the general community, with a petition with nearly 2,000 signatures now circulating around. Sir, that's not unanimous, okay? That is hyperbole. The opposition is so bad, I'm not suggesting there's not opposition, but to call it unanimous is untrue. The opposition is so bad that it is causing prominent community members to publicly call for protests, staff and board resignations, That's a lot. And countless other things, which have also been mentioned here. Simply choosing to ignore these widespread concerns of the community is simply going to erode trust in the community that we as staff and you all as a board have commitment to the WCA's mission and values. What's happening with this sentence here, Zachary? Simply choosing to ignore these widespread concerns of the community is simply going to erode trust in the community that we as staff and you all as a board have commitment to the WCA's mission and values. Okay. There is opposition, yes. Is it unanimous? Technically, no. Alright, let's move on. Taking the cap off again. Now, finally, using the point that the penalties are not visible at full speed is stunning to me. As to a well-trained eye and a faster solver, these penalties indeed do seem to be visible in full speed. Even my old eyes can see them, alright? Even my old eyes can see that. My head works at about 5 frames a second, and I can see it. Let's just remember that Zachary is not part of the WRC. He was on the WCA Advisory Committee, and he is a trainee delegate. Although I am unsure about whether a confirmation bias of some sort may be in play here by these community members. I said that too, about a different thing. I still feel rather uneasy about this argument being tossed aside. After all, as I mentioned earlier, we are once again letting 18 and 19 TPS 2x2 solves stand that frame count higher than the displayed time. Technically, that is true. Now, I feel strongly, this is a good point at the end here by Zachary. He sums it up quite well. There's some spoofy stuff going on in places, but he sums it up quite well. I feel strongly that the database in our organization are now displaying an illegitimately achieved world record as part of this controversial decision. I will say that personally, as a member of the speedcubing community, this reflects how I feel as well. There is an illegitimately achieved world record standing. That is like, that's truth, right? The world record for 2x2 broke regulations, 2, potentially 3. I can't remember what the third one was. But that is a fact. That is a fact. In my opinion. When we as delegates pride ourselves on having competitions that have fair and equal conditions, this, to me, does not include having a world record that can now be near impossible to beat in a legitimate manner. Oh, I'm not going to get stuck in the weeds about arguing about whether it's impossible to be beat. That is to miss the point of what's actually happening here, I think. Personally speaking, I'm frankly disappointed. As a community member, a delegate and a former council leader, and I imagine everyone else is too, we've taken a step back and the community has now lost its trust in us. I'd argue that we have failed them immensely. It's very dramatic. I don't 100% disagree with that sentiment. This was an impossible situation that the board were put in because of the frameworks they're tied to. It was almost impossible to apply. Logic seems like the wrong word because it's not illogical. They followed their procedure and policy to the letter. They have done a good job, I think, the board, in following their policy to the letter. However, that policy is scuffed as. It's not fit for purpose. And unfortunately, the WRC seems to have let that happen. And that's hard. That's hard. So, I'm not impressed with anyone, really. And then I'm just going to raise this little point here. I don't know who this person is, Jared Blanco. If you want to ensure a fair environment and consistency, then penalise both. I cannot disagree with that. I would penalise more than just the two, more than just Wang Yiheng and the 0.53. I would actually penalise anything that was brought to me where people were just like, look at this video, tell me that's not a slide. And I'd be like, all right, fair enough, you're done. DNF. That's why I'm not in charge. Allowing cheated records to stand may be fair in the sense that it's consistent, but fair for competitors now who have to try and get records under a different set of regulations and punishments. That's not fairness. Nice point, well made. So I thought that was worth going through. Why did I think it was worth going through? Because it does bring up the feeling that we are left with as a community, I suppose, which is, what? Huh? How? I'm still left going, how? How has this been able to happen? I hope these videos are helping you kind of understand what's going on as I'm trying to understand what's going on. I'm not here trying to blame anyone for any of this, even though I have literally used the words I blame both the WRC and the board. But from the evidence I've seen, from what we've looked at, from what we've seen today, from what has emerged in the last like 12 hours, this is a real mess, and I feel for the people involved. I really do. This is a horrible situation for the board to have been put in. And board members are volunteers who just really love Cuban heaps. So I am feeling empathy for the board. I am feeling empathy for the WRC, the Regulations Committee. I'm feeling the frustration of the community, mostly from the community. I will say I'm feeling there's frustration about the result, and I'm also feeling frustration about the lack of understanding. Just not knowing. The unknown has been frustrating. The what has been allowed to fester, is what I'm feeling. So that concludes this one. The next one's pretty heavy and pretty wild. So I'll go do that now. All right? Have fun. Be nice to people. Be nice to people. All right? Far out. Be nice to people. Would you? Bye.